adoption show.
So I'm sitting here on my porch in my Ukrainian apartment, editing, and I thought that I would take this opportunity to tell the story of our little boy, Alec. So this is the story of a boy. But I just think it's so cool that I'm sitting here on this little porch. I have to show you. I'm overlooking my laundry. Well, there's usually more laundry. This is where you dry your clothes. And then this is a window. I'm on the 9th floor. And in there is the apartment. And it's just, I have a modem. That thing is about $50. And then you pay, I don't know, probably less than $1 a day to get internet. But you pay on a phone card and you attach it to this thing. So it's pretty reasonable. And over here I have my phone, my Ukrainian phone, that if I am confused about anything, I call my facilitator and he speaks to the person I'm confused with in Russian. That is my cup of chai, which is so good. So I think it'd be fair to say that both Mark and I consider this an unplanned adoption. We, for those of you who don't know, have a family of 6 children already, 2 by birth, 3 adopted from Ethiopia, and 1 from Guatemala. Our children range in age from 6 years old up to 20, and we have a very high-energy, fun family, obviously diverse. And my husband and I work as musicians. We have our own band, and mainly in New York City, and do somewhat high-profile weddings and events. So, where do I begin? So for years I kind of just went along with my business of doing these high-end events in New York City and just living my life with my 2 children and surrounded by a lot of money and events where they spent thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on their events. And at one point I just remember thinking, gosh, is this all there is to it? I mean, I'm enjoying my job, but there's got to be something more. So we ended up adopting from Guatemala, which was an amazing thing. But then when we went and we adopted from Ethiopia in 2008, we adopted 3 children at once, and they were orphaned because of AIDS. And through that process, at the time, I became aware that there were 143 million orphans. Now the number is something like 163 million. And while my children didn't have HIV or AIDS, they were not infected by AIDS, but they were affected by AIDS. Affected because they lost their family and they were orphaned due to that. So after I adopted them, I remember when Mark and I went to Ethiopia, we visited a hospital, an orphanage for HIV positive children, and we were just surprised at how beautiful, and I guess we just had no clue as to what the whole HIV issue was, and never even realized it was an option to adopt them. We thought that they would, die the minute you adopt them, and that everybody in your family would get infected due to that. I mean, there was so much fear and so much misinformation. But I remember coming back from that trip with my children, realizing that because we had adopted 3 kids that were orphaned to AIDS, that the subject and the topic of AIDS was going to be part of our lives, I guess, forever. So I started to research things. Okay, fast forward now to where we're sitting. We never really intended to adopt again. Our family is very full, and yet there was this little boy that I found on this website, this Ukrainian website, and saw his picture, started praying about him, praying for his picture, for him to find a family. He was HIV positive, and he was in Ukraine. This was about a year ago. And we were just praying and praying and thought he was so beautiful and just had him be part of our prayer life and prayer time. And again, he was posted on a refrigerator. I had him in frames, and when I would go to events to speak, I would talk about him and talk about HIV adoption. Well, after a while, come to find out, I had connected with a woman that I knew through our church, because we have pastor friends who are actually in Kyiv, and they connected me with this woman who also had known almost simultaneously when I found out about this region, Zaporozhye, that this little boy was in. She had also been contacted for the first time in years of working here in Ukraine. She'd been working in Ukraine for 17 years. She'd never heard of the Solnichka orphanage. So I had just found out about him. I found out where he was, and she simultaneously had just sent me a note and said, and I said to her, do you happen to know about this orphanage, the Sun Orphanage in Zaporozhye? And she said, you won't believe this, but just an hour ago I was contacted about helping to provide a window for this orphanage. Somebody wants to donate a window, and I had never been there. Well, then she said she had just called, and that they had needed also gifts, because none of them had gotten gifts for Christmas. This was this past Christmas. And I was like, okay, it was early December, and I'm like, broke. We don't really have a lot of money right now because business has been slow. But we will help somehow get gifts. Well, we're close to Christmas. Nobody's coming forward with gifts, and I'm just thinking, how is this going to happen? And in the meantime, I'm still praying for this little guy who we had been calling Alexei. And one day I opened up my garage door, and behind my car, as I was about to back up, were 5 boxes of toys. And what had happened was, coincidentally, a woman who was the mother of Ella, my Ethiopian daughter's best friend, was the manager at a dollar store, some kind of dollar store, Dollar General or Dollar Tree or something. And she just knew that because I knew orphans, that I might be able to figure out what to do with all of these gifts. So I was in awe that they just appeared at my door, and I packed up all of these gifts. And then it was going to miss our Christmas because it was so late, December 25th, and it was going to miss their Christmas, which was like in January. I knew that this little boy, Alexei, his birth date was February 26th, because there had been rumors that when the children turned 5, and in some places this is actually true, but when they turn 5, they can be removed to an internat, and sometimes those internats aren't that great. They've been known to just be a bad place for little kids mixed in with the older kids, and different parts of Ukraine can be different. You know, some may be great, some may not be. I thought that that would have been his fate. So I was really, really hoping somehow that even though he wouldn't know who we were, that he would get some gifts and just a blessing somehow by February 26th. So I had packed up all of these gifts, and now it was in January, but I knew that the gifts would not make their January Christmas. And I wrapped up the box, and I looked down, and the box had his very birth date written in it in Sharpie. It said 2/26/06.
Okay, this is unreal. This box says 2/26/6. I'm sending this to an orphanage in Ukraine for this boy I am in love with. I have an adoption crush on. If it's God's grace, I'm going to adopt. Too many miracles. The box has his birth date on it. I just grabbed it from a previous box, and I was actually hoping this box would make it by his birthday. This is too weird. Amazing!
At that point, I really felt like the eye of God was on this child so much that, and yet it dawned on me that now I may be the only one who's also focused on him like a hawk at this point, and feeling in my heart just this passion for him, you know, across the world. But when I saw that supernaturally his birth date was written on the box, I realized that God had not forgotten his birth. And I didn't know anything about him, but I was like, God knows this child and is so extreme in his love for him that he will send me presents and put his birth date on a box. And I realized at that point that, wow, this is a very serious responsibility of mine to advocate for this child, to send these gifts, because if God himself will bring me in North Carolina 5 boxes of presents and write his birth date on a box, then I have to follow through, because I don't want to be the one stopping this process for God. And then it was just right after that, maybe late January, that we made a decision to adopt him, and which seemed insane because work is very slow. Our house situation, we're facing either foreclosure or some kind of battle with our bank on a modification agreement that they have reneged on, and so we don't know. We may not even have a home, and or we may not have that home, and so it seemed like an insane thing to do to try to adopt, and yet we felt very strongly that God had made it crystal clear that we were to go, that we were to go, that we were to go. So when we got here, just 10 days ago or so, and we looked on the back of one of the referral pictures, and we saw that Mark's birth date had been written also on the back of that picture, January 20th, 2011. Obviously his birthday's not 2011, but it's January 20th. I also realized that that was just about the time that we made this decision, and it was just so apparent. And now, as I'm sitting here with this little boy, realizing he was abandoned on his birth date on February 26th of 2006 and left because of his stupid HIV status, that he was left there to possibly die or to be left alone and not to be nurtured and loved. And yet, against great odds and the love of caretakers and the orphanage, he is alive today, and that God did not forget his birthday. God did not forget that who he was and where he was, and that he needed a family. It may have taken 5 years, but it makes me think that, they have that expression that if a tree falls in the forest, is anybody there and nobody's there to hear it, doesn't make a noise. And it's like, if a child is born if a child is born in a hospital miles and miles away and abandoned, and nobody hears his cries, and nobody hears that, is he forgotten by God? Does God forget him? And he doesn't. The miracle that we are witnessing, that this child was left and forgotten and ignored and invisible, and now a family from America, minding their own business, has been praying for this child whose picture was on the refrigerator, and whose very hopes and thoughts and prayers for him have been confirmed by God by these moments of having his name written on a box in their house, his birth date written on a box in their house, presents appearing, God making it crystal clear that we are to go. And when I prayed upon it, I was just like, we can't go. This is a bad time. We have a lot of children. It's a bad time. And I really felt that God was saying, no, it's a perfect time. It's a perfect time, because it's not about your money. It's not about what the world is doing to you. It's about what you can do for me now. And I'm telling you that in my reality, beyond this world, this is a perfect time for you to get him. So we're here. And what boggles my mind is that we're going to have our court date where he will officially be ours. The day after Ukrainian Independence Day, their 20th year of freedom, is when he's going to be released from his prison and into a family. So little Alec Parker Falchuk, I hope his story, and I hope that he will remember that if a baby cries in an orphanage and is abandoned, God does not forget. He is heard. And that it wasn't that he was abandoned and left alone. It was that God loved him so much, to the extreme, that, and he has great plans for him, that he will send a family, and he will do that for the other orphans as well. So this is Alec's story. Story of being beloved from the day that he was born, regardless of any kind of status, regardless of a label that calls him invalid. That God says, you are validated, you are significant, you are beautiful, and you are loved, and I will go to the ends of the earth to embrace you and bring you home.